In this video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at methods and creating our own methods here within Visual C#. And so to begin with, I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to make a project here to actually do conversion of units of measurement in the English measurement system. So we're going to go ahead and just call this one measurement conversion. And I'll just go ahead and hit OK. And to start this one off, I'm just going to go ahead and add a couple of objects here on my form to work with. Starting off, I'll throw a button on here. I don't need that. I'm going to need a list box. I'll throw a label on here as well. Yeah, as well as a text box for some input. And I'll go ahead and use what I've got now. So the label, we're just going to go ahead and change the text property of the label just to say enter number of inches. And I'll give my text box a name to work with. Call this one txt inches. Give my button a name. I'll just call this one cmd calc. And we're going to go ahead and give that a name or a text value. There we go. And I'll give my list box a name as well. Just call this one lst output. There we go. So those are my objects I'm going to work with on my form. So let's go ahead and start our application. And basically what I want to do is I want to make it so that they enter in the number of inches to start with. And once they enter in the number of inches, we're going to go ahead and convert it to feet as well as inches. And so that'll be our first measurement, is feet to inches, our feet and inches here, whatever they enter into our text box. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click on the calculate button. And so far, when we've been doing in our code, we've just basically been creating a method for a click event for our buttons. And you can see right here, one was created for us. And in future videos, we're going to go ahead and take a look at how to make our own. But in this video, we've just basically been using the methods that were already pre-created for us based on our actions on our form. So what we're going to look at doing is creating some additional methods, something similar to what we have here, but our own methods that we can use for our own blocks of code. And after a while of writing code, you may find that your code ends up being something that repeats over and over again. You may need that same block of code. And so it would make sense to make your own method and then just call that method whenever you need that code to work. And so we're going to take a look at that as we go through here. So I'm going to start off here by creating a simple method that's going to be for our goodbye message and for the closing of our application. So what I'll look here is this is a method here, and I can go ahead and click on the minus sign to collapse that, and I've got one here as well. And so what I've got now, what I'm working with, you can see that's been collapsed and that's been collapsed, and you can see now, get a better look at what our form looks like as far as our class is concerned. This is our class. And so this is where within the class where our methods are going to be contained. And so I'm going to go ahead and create myself a new method. Now it's very easy to do. In fact, all we need to do is I'm going to go ahead and create it down below my click event method. And there we go. Give myself some space between the opening and ending curly brace. And let's go ahead and create our new method. It's really easy to start with. I've got two words to start with. I've either got public or I've got private. And so I can do public or private, and I'll just explain the difference between the two. Public means that this method can be called from outside of our class. So basically, if I've got more than one form or more than one class that I'm working with in my application, I can use public and make that accessible to anything else that I've got written in my code outside of my class. Private, however, I'll go ahead and do private. Private is very similar to public, except for the difference is it's everything within my class can use this. And so that's the difference as far as the scope of my method, the usability of my method. By default, if I don't type anything to start this off with, it's going to be private. So I'll just go ahead and create private for now, and this is going to be my first one. And we'll go ahead and continue here with our next part, which is going to be whether I want static or non-static. And sometimes you'll see it written static. And basically, the static versus non-static refers to how the method can actually be called, as well as whether or not I can use some of the objects on our form. The default is going to be non-static, so if I didn't have anything there, it would actually just say it would be non-static. And so for most of the methods I'm going to be creating, they're actually going to all be non-static. So I'm not going to type that keyword in. It's an optional one. I don't need to have it just because the default is non-static. And that will allow us to use the objects on our form by having it non-static within my method. So I'm just going to leave that there, not typed in. The last part is whether or not it's going to return something within my method. And to start with, this first one is going to be void. And you'll see void a lot of times written on our methods, and that just basically means it's not going to return a value out. Basically, it's not going to hold a value in memory when the method runs that can be used for basically another method or for some kind of calculation. And so void just means, and later on we'll do a video on how to return values back out of a method, but for right now we're going to just leave it private void. And so that's just going to let us know that it needs to, it's not going to return anything. This is required. Having the void or having a data type that's going to be returned out of there is required. Now private, I said, is not, so just the void is all I really needed to get this going here. But I'll leave private in there just to let us know that we're using it within our class, and it's a good habit to type that in. So private void, and then now what I want to do is type in the name of the method that I want to have. And a lot of times methods start with a verb, basically because they're an action doing something. So most programmers do start it off with a verb. It does have to start off with a letter or an underscore. So what we're going to go ahead and do is I'll give this one a method to say close goodbye. And that's what I'm going to call this one. Close my application and goodbye. And what we'll need to do after we give it a name is we need to have the opening and closing parentheses. So this is the start of my method. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. I need to have some curly braces. I'll just space down here and give myself some curly braces. And you'll see now that it's formatted as far as tablature is concerned, it's tabbed in like my other methods. And so this is the beginning. I have no code in here for my method, so let's go ahead and write some code. I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick message box. Messagebox.show. And I'm just going to go ahead and show the text goodbye. And so that'll pop up, and then that's our first part of it, is just to say quick little text box pops up, message box pops up that says goodbye whenever we close our application. And then I need to go ahead and quit my application, so this is going to just type in application dot, there we go, exit. And that'll close my application for us. And so it's going to do two different things. Now, this code can be called from any other method within my class because it's private. So let's go to a different method. I'm going to go ahead and collapse this one, and let's open up my method. Now it doesn't make sense for us to close our application whenever we click on our calculate button. So I'll just go to my form real quick. I'm going to go ahead and copy this, Control C, Control V. There we go. And let's just go ahead and change the text of this button to say quit, or you could say finished. There we go, finished would be better. And then let's go ahead and change the button name to CMD finish. There we go. So let's double click on this, and you'll see that I've now got a method for the CMD finished click event. And let's just call our goodbye. I'll expand that out there. So I want to use this code and this method within this method. So whenever somebody clicks CMD click or CMD finished click, I want to use this code. So how we'll do this is just basically start typing it in. Close, and you'll notice it says goodbye is already there, and then our parentheses. And this is going to run all of the code that I have within this method. And so in this case, if I want to, later on I can actually just keep reusing this if I have other buttons on other forms. Now I've got to have everything within my class. If I made this public, I could use it outside of my class. But if I have other objects that I want to have use this, I can basically reuse this code as many times as I want without actually having to write it all out. Now this is a really short one, but imagine this is actually 100 lines of code. Instead of having to copy and paste those 100 lines of codes every time, I can just keep calling that method over and over again, and it will run those lines of code for us. And so this is our first look at creating ourselves our own method and calling it in a different application. So let's go ahead and I'll run this. And so here we go. If I go ahead and hit finished, you'll see the goodbye, and it will close my application. And so all that happened just by hitting the or running the close goodbye method. So this concludes the video on our first method, where we can actually create a method and call the method to be used within our form.